download special that we're running rather than on the Fridays at 2 o'clock, but we're running it on Thursdays or Thursday today, just to make sure that we can get our special guest in, which is Simon Kemp. So welcome to Simon. We'll do some introductions. Unfortunately, Lorena hasn't been able to make it yet, so I'm hoping that she's going to join us, but she did say that she was going to try, but maybe she's going to send some apologies. I don't know yet. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Alex.
Good morning, all, depending on where you are. So my name's Alex Abbott. I'm the founder of Sapiro. We're a B2B sales consulting firm focusing on value creation and enablement.
Rob.
Good morning, all. I am Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results and a proud DLA partner.
And it's what, 5 a.m. with you?
It's now 6:01.
Okay, fine. Thanks. Lenwood.
Good morning. I'm Lenwood Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate. We focus on human-centric talent acquisition, and I'm a partner of DLA Ignite.
Adam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tim's business partner and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm just bowled over by the fact that two people from America would be on this call at 10 o'clock in the morning. That shows incredible.
This is the earliest. This is,
and especially is that we changed our clocks, so it's.
I think that helped actually.
Changed it, so it was. They said that the earliest that they could do was about 6 o'clock, so we actually got that. Anyway, Simon, do you want to introduce yourself? And do you want to also give some context in terms of what data that we're going to talk about and explain how you put it together and where you get the data points from and stuff? That would be excellent.
Sure.
And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to the guys who woke up ridiculously early. So both Linwood and Rob, thank you for sacrificing sleep to join us today. That's deserving of quite an accolade. So I'm Simon Kemp. Nice to meet you all. I run Kepios, which is an advisory service that helps the world make sense of what people are really doing on the internet. I also run Data Reportal, which is where we share all of the reports that we produce in partnership with We Are Social and Hootsuite. So if you've seen those reports before, you know what we're going to talk about today. If you've not, these are probably one of the most widely read resources for making sense of digital behaviors in every single country in the world. So we cover 245 countries in a certain amount of detail, some of them more than others. The only two countries we don't cover are North Korea, because there's no internet there, and Pitcairn, which is a tiny little island in the Pacific where there are only 55 people, and therefore any data might be personally identifiable, therefore we don't share it. For everything else, we do what people are doing on the internet, social media, mobile devices, e-commerce, and increasingly we're looking at the way that people engage and interact with digital marketing as well, but from the audience perspective. So those are the numbers that we're going to go through today. We've got a bunch of partners that help us collect and share that data, so especially folks like GWI and Statista, but there's a whole bunch of other fantastic people in there. I will try and call them out appropriately as we go through the data, so you know, as listeners and viewers today, where you can get more of these fantastic numbers.
And I think that certainly in my own personal opinion about the data, there was another set of data which became and the person that put it together, she moved jobs, didn't she? And then the whole and so what your data has now become the data point for the internet and social media. That's my opinion, but I don't see yet. You know, it's the and I know that over the last few years you've gone through and worked with organizations so you know it used to be global, and then you've brought it down to the different regions, and then you do it now by country, because I've been on lots of your seminars and people go, do you have the figures for Sierra Leone? And you go, well, yeah, it's out next month.
Yep. Absolutely. And in fact, just on that, they are all out in February. So the brand new set of data, we're already working on it. We will have our new country reports in February 2023. So hopefully very soon we will have a new round of numbers. But obviously, we've already got the 2022 numbers up there. So if you need numbers now, you can get those. And they're all free. That's the thing I completely forgot to mention. You can access all of these reports completely for free whenever you like over on datareportal.com.
And every presentation I give, because we all use the data. And I always say follow Simon Kemp, which then always, and so I now come to, when I do webinars, I always come with your LinkedIn URL to get people to follow.
Nice.
So
Thank you, sir.
just sort of let you know that.
I think the thing about your data is that it's in a world of superlatives and sleight of hand, it is one truth point around data. And what's really interesting is that in every presentation that I've done where I have used one of your slides and said, this is from, and told them exactly where it's come from, it's the one piece of data that we never, ever, ever get challenged on. So, for example, there will be large pale blue CRM companies that produce data about stuff. And typically you would show that sort of data to a prospect or a client, and they would say, well, of course, they've got a vested interest in saying that, haven't they? And they have, and I'm not saying that the data isn't true because of that, but there is always an undercurrent of, okay, this is helping to tell the particular narrative that I want to tell in order to sell more of my product to somebody. Whereas yours, we put the stuff up and people just go, okay, that's really interesting. Never is there a question that there could be an undercurrent of sleight of hand or not complete transparency.
That's the plan. I think, as I'm sure we're going to dig into some of the individual numbers. So just to give some context to that before we go in there, all research, all data has its flaws. None of the numbers in our report are perfect in the sense that numbers are only ever the start of the conversation. Data isn't an answer. It is something that allows you to make a better informed decision, which leads to an answer. But without data, you're going to be guessing in the dark a lot of the time. Now, I would always encourage people, wherever possible, get a three-dimensional view of data. So this is something that we talked about with GWI just last week as well. So GWI is one of our main report partners, and they do one of the best surveys, if not the best survey on digital behaviors in the world. But they also say, wherever you can, look for three separate sources to inform your decisions when it comes to data, because only when you've got those three different angles can you make fully informed decisions in confidence. So I will be giving you numbers based on the ones that I think are the most appropriate for today's answers, but remember that there are always other answers out there, and it's always wise to check those answers too.
Yeah, I saw a piece of research recently which said we asked email marketers what they thought of email marketing. and of course we know what the answer is.
Email marketing.
So there is data, and there's data. And there's also, and I'm not going to name them, but there is an individual who constantly leaves comments on LinkedIn that says this has to be true because it says so in my book. His book.
That's a good perspective.
And his book is based on opinion, not on data. So there is this certain amount of not saying it's fake news, but there's a certain amount of a line between what is what is real and what is not real.
Artistic license.
Yes. Who wants to go first in asking Simon a question?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, go on, Rob.
So,
Go, Rob.
Simon, one of the charts that stood out to me most was the social media platform audience overlaps chart.
Yeah.
That's in your deck. That was slide 113. What do you
To be precise.
think? Yeah.
Of the hundreds that are in there.
What do you think are the implications and maybe more importantly, the suggested actions for marketers when, for example, they see that over 50% of the LinkedIn users are also on TikTok?
Yeah. So, Rob, this is one of my favorite slides as well. Thank you for bringing this one out. So this comes from GWI. You're going to hear me reference GWI quite a lot here because I use their data for all sorts of things. But so their survey analyzes working age adults, so 16 to 64-year-olds across 48 of the biggest economies in the world. That base, just to give you a perspective, is roughly 80% of all the internet users in the world. So it's pretty representative of everybody out there, although admittedly it focuses on larger economies. But nonetheless, considering that that is a big chunk of the social media world, that data provides fascinating insights. We could quite easily talk about that single chart for at least a full hour, if not more. But let me give you a couple of things that I pull out of that. I think the most important one, so that the key stat that I would focus on in there is that regardless of what social platform you're looking at, even the very biggest of the platforms out there, you're going to be able to reach more than 98% of the users of any given social platform on at least one other platform. So this idea that you can reach unique users on a particular platform, there's going to be one or two of them, but in reality, you can reach social media users across multiple platforms on a regular basis. And that then leads you to much more interesting questions. So let me step back a bit even from that chart. 93 to 95%, depending on which set of stats you look at, of internet users already use social media if they're in the relevant age groups. So obviously most social platforms restrict use to people aged 13 and above. 93 to 95% of internet users already use social media. 75% of all eligible age groups, regardless of whether they're even on the internet, use social media. So it's clear that social media as a base is huge, right? But from that perspective, your questions then are, how do I use social media to really better reach my audiences and deliver value? Knowing that you can reach social media users across multiple different platforms, I think gives you a bit more freedom. You don't need to panic too much about whether you should be on platform X, Y, or Z. You can say, with one or two of these big platforms, I'm going to reach the vast majority of these users. And then I can make choices. If I still have some bandwidth and budget left, I can then select other platforms based on creative opportunities, based on particular formats that they allow me to do, based on usage contexts even. So when does my audience use this particular platform? What are they using it for? What's the right kind of thing that I could deliver to them? And how is that different to what I would deliver on another platform? So you brought out LinkedIn there. Let's suppose that a lot of the people that are tuning into today's conversation are B2B marketers, because it's one of those things that doesn't often get enough attention in the marketing conversation. Just because you're trying to reach a B2B audience doesn't mean you need to only focus on LinkedIn, although it is obviously a great place to start. But if you think about it, Twitter is also a great place to come in and reach those kinds of people. I think you also want to be looking at Facebook as an interesting platform, much as it feels like it's a place where you can go and chat to friends and family. Just because of its sheer size, Facebook is always a great opportunity for you to do B2B marketing activities as well. So don't let stereotypes, I think, get in the way of your planning. Use these data points to say, my audience is here. They're all over the place doing lots of different things. When is the best time and place to reach them with the message I care about? And how can I make that as impactful as possible? As I said, Rob, I could talk about that chart all day. So that is a not so succinct and rambling start to the answer. If you want to dig into that, by all means, please come on with the following question. But the good news is that there's so much more related to that conversation that we can go back to in other questions as well.
Excellent.
I have a follow-on question to that one in terms of how businesses, and it's not specific to any data points in the report, but I think you raise a really valid point there about business users, consumers of business products are on these other platforms, yet companies themselves don't feel comfortable marketing to them on those other platforms because they don't feel it's in the right business environment.
And I think, Alex, that as an observation. Hey, Lorena, thanks for joining us. Woo.
Hi.
Just introduce Lorena.
Excuse me. Yes, no. Excuse me, because I had some errands to do, so I'm a little bit late. I'm in Madrid right now, but
hello.
Thank you. Hello, nice to meet you, Simon, and to all the DLA team. Yeah.
Thanks, Lorena.
Thanks to you. I'm so happy. So I listen.
Cool. So, Alex, I think on that,
Lorena, just to say, just to summarise, we are we're answering Rob's question, which is about different people on different platforms. Sorry, Simon.
It's all good. No, so Alex, that's a great question. I think we often put ourselves into buckets and pigeonholes as marketers. Like, so this specific thing is relevant for this job and that's all we can use it for. And I think we forget that when we're talking to B2B audiences, for the vast majority of the time, they're human beings. Even people in procurement are human beings, apparently, which is sometimes a fascinating insight. No disrespect to procurement people whatsoever. But I think, this idea that you need to only use a business channel to deliver a business message, there's a certain logic to that. But at the same time, you're missing opportunities to deliver different kinds of messages to different people. I think especially when you start looking at platforms like Twitter, which is a news platform above all else, when you look at the reasons why people use the Twitter platform, the vast majority of users come in and say, that's the primary reason I go to Twitter, is to get news. So, if you're delivering news-related information, if you want to deliver facts and similar, then Twitter's a fantastic place to do that. And it's also a place where you can have very different kinds of conversations to the ones that you would have on LinkedIn. They're not always comfortable conversations. Admittedly, Twitter can be quite a noisy environment, but nonetheless, as a marketer, provided you understand what you're setting yourself up for, then it is a great place to have certain kinds of conversations. And likewise, if you wanted to do business activities on TikTok, if you're reaching younger users who may be influential in a certain kind of decision-making process, then absolutely it's worth considering. So yeah, I think the key bit is to not get distracted by platforms and technology. I think as marketers and as journalists, a lot of the time, we tend to get distracted by numbers and technologies and names and whatever else. But if we forget all of that completely and we go back to marketing basics, who are the people that I care about and want to engage? What are the things I want to influence in terms of their thinking and their behavior? And what do I need to share with them in order to change those thoughts and behaviors? Then all of a sudden you've already narrowed it down to, these are the times and places when my messaging is going to be appropriate, and therefore these platforms are good places to deliver that messaging to this audience in those times and places. That's a much better way of doing it, rather than going, what's the hottest social media platform out there? What's the next big thing? Which, in all honesty, is going to lead you to all sorts of jumping around and getting distracted and exhausting yourself a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great. Thanks, Simon. Any people want to come back on that?
Well, I kind of think that follows on to the question.
You had that face, Adam.
Yeah, the question that I wanted to ask. So for the people in the audience, Tim and I were traveling 4 years ago, and we were in Singapore, and we met up with Simon. We already knew Simon from social, so we were kind of friends, and we had been consuming his content for a long time prior to meeting him face to face. And it was lovely because when we met up, we were sort of felt like we were old friends, and we were very much singing from the same song sheet in terms of everything that we were doing. And tracking back over the data, one of the things that's really interesting is that the growth of social media platforms, as they have got bigger and bigger and consumed more and more of people that are on the internet, it is natural to assume, as you are pulling new users from an ever decreasing pot of people who are not currently users, the rate of growth will slow. However, the rate of growth hasn't slowed, which is one of the things that I find absolutely mind-boggling, because all of your kind of knowledge about how the world works has been challenged by this. So my question was this: given that 93.5% of people with an internet connection are active social media users, new networks like TikTok keep coming out to consume some of those people, how can the established players like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, even TikTok, how can those platforms continue to drive growth? Because there aren't any people left to join Facebook. Everybody's on there. So how can that be stagnated? And interesting that the number of the amount of time that people spend on social networks actually isn't really growing. In the last 6 months, it's only grown by a minute. It's gone from like 2 minutes 28 to 2 minutes 29. So there's a tiny little increase in use, although that may not be reflected by some of the people on this call who may be using it much more. But when you're fishing in that smaller and smaller pool for new people to join your platform, what's going to happen?
So, you're bringing in quite a few different things there, Adam, and my memory when it comes to questions is terrible, so I'm going to answer the first one and forget the other two, so remind me to come back. So first of all, actually, we are starting to see growth slow, but I think that I'm gonna come back to explain why we don't need to worry about that. So we saw a big surge in adoption of social platforms during the COVID years, as they're going to be forever known in my lexicon. So the COVID years, we saw this big boost because a lot of people who had resisted coming on to social platforms up until that point realized that that was the only way they were going to get to speak to their grandchildren, or that they were going to be able to carry on doing their business and whatever else. So there was an artificial acceleration of adoption during the past 2 years. And inevitably that brought a lot of the remaining people that weren't using social, who were already online, into the social world. We're going to see those numbers slow down. So the most important reason for that is the adoption of the internet cannot continue to grow at the rates it has been. So by the end of 2023, more than 2/3 of the world's population will be online. They will be a supermajority. The laws of maths state that it cannot continue to grow at the rates that it had been indefinitely because there are just not enough people, exactly as you said, Adam. So we're going to see those growth rates slow down. That is not in any way a problem because scale is not the answer here. So we've already got close to 3 billion users on Facebook. We've got more than 2.5 billion on YouTube. We've got more than 1 billion on another 5 platforms. Let's stop panicking about scale because the more important number in all of that is that the average social media user of any age across the entire world uses more than 7 platforms every month. So it sort of goes back to Rob's question from earlier. I think what we've got is these overlaps in audiences. We know that there are more than 4.7 billion social media users around the world. That number is more than big enough to justify getting excited. How you then choose to break down where you interact with them in social platforms and whether you even choose to call them social platforms is a much more important question. So to come to your point about time spent, now that time hasn't massively increased. There is inevitably a little bit of cannibalization between some of the smaller platforms to the bigger platforms. But what's most interesting, and this depends a little bit on which data points you're looking at, TikTok has suddenly jumped to almost the top. So this sort of flops and flips every quarter at the moment. Data from data.ai, who allow us to analyze behaviors on mobile phones, use of social apps. YouTube and TikTok fighting and swapping places at the top of those rankings, roughly 23 hours per user per month, which is incredible. It's more than a waking day for both platforms each month. But if you look at where that time has come from, the question is, has the TikTok time cannibalized time from Instagram and Facebook? The answer is there's not a lot of evidence to show that that's been at scale. Most of those 23 hours seem to have come from somewhere else. And I'm guessing a lot of those 23 hours have come from things like broadcast TV. When you look at the people who spend a lot of time on TikTok and the reasons why they're going to TikTok, they're going there to be entertained. They're going there for sit back content. They want to be entertained and amused. TikTok does that brilliantly. And it does it in many cases far better than a lot of the TV options that people outside of Western markets are going to have available to them. Is that social, though? And I think this is where, especially for a lot of the folks thinking about what they do with this information on today's session, is it's great to know there's lots of people using it, but where does it fit in my mix? And I think this idea of a marketing mix is essential. We are not looking at binary choices here because of the fact that people use those 7 platforms because of those audience overlaps. You can happily use Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and Twitter in your marketing mix at the same time if you've got the resource and the bandwidth to do so. But is that the right thing for you to do is a very different question. It's down to you, your brand's needs, your audience, and all those kinds of things for you to make those choices. The data helps, but ultimately you're going to need to make a decision. But yeah, so I think a couple of takeaways from that question, Adam. Don't worry about growth. Growth doesn't matter anymore because it's so big anyway. We can pretty much say that everybody who wants to use social media is going to be using it at some point in the very near future, and therefore that's great. It's no longer a question of are people there, are our audiences there? They are. But how you use it is the much more important question. And that's going to come down to spending a little bit more time as a marketer or as a business person or even as a government analyzing what people are doing on these platforms and then how you use that to your advantage.
Brilliant. But although as you were talking, you said something which I found really interesting. Well, you said lots of things I found really interesting, but one thing in particular, one throwaway comment, which was, even if we decide to keep calling them social platforms.
Yeah.
Unpack that for us, because that's an interesting. Have they moved from being a website to being so embedded in people's lives that they're not social platforms? They're just part of, like, email. It's not a comms channel. It's just email.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, and the rest of the folks in the session as well, feel free to dive in with your questions and observations on this as well at any point. But just to unpack that, the reason I gave you that throwaway comment, and this is one of the things that we're spending a lot of time with our Kepios clients talking about, is by lumping all of these things together in this bucket we call social media, we're then fighting for budget that has been assigned to that in daft ways. In my mind, if you're building a marketing plan today, especially with the rise of ad-supported streaming platforms like Netflix, if you had to choose how to allocate your budget between Facebook, TikTok, and Netflix ads, I'm inclined to say TikTok is closer to Netflix today than it is to Facebook. And from that perspective, a lot of our decisions as marketers come down to how we allocate our limited resources, time, effort, budget, and similar. Calling TikTok a social platform just because it allows comments. News websites allow us to leave comments. Are they social platforms or are they news platforms? I think it's these daft things of it doesn't matter what we call it. It's that classic Shakespeare quote, a rose by any other name is just as sweet. That's the point here. These are environments in which we can deliver content and engage people in activities that matter, whether it's conversational or otherwise. Identify where those environments are, regardless of what you call them, and prioritize the ones that allow you to do the things you want with the people you want at the relevant times and places. So yeah, I think that's the key bit here. I wouldn't really think that TikTok is a classical social media platform, and that in no way affects whether I think it's good or bad. It's an amazing opportunity that does a lot of different stuff, and it's worthy of analysing on its own merits. So we've talked a little bit about that, and I know that Lenwood's got questions as well. He's been waiting patiently there, and obviously Lorena as well. Whenever you want to dive in too.
It's a fascinating conversation, and this the idea of it's actually not that I probably more than the average person am focused on social media, but the depth in which you're talking about it is showing that I've got much more to learn. So thank you so much for what you're sharing here. One of the things that as you were explaining that I really was questioning is whether many organizations, and maybe this isn't a question for you, but just a question generally, which is whether organizations really have sufficient resources allocated to understanding the platforms and their audience and the type of content that would work best on that platform and how they should be using it with employees. I mean, are people do they really have enough resources dedicated to this?
Brilliant question. One of the biggest challenges, I'm sure so many people joining today's session are going to relate to that question as well, because a lot of the time I feel overwhelmed by what's out there. I'm doing a presentation for one of the world's largest advertisers, preparing that at the moment. And even, I'm like, I have to go onto the internet and see what are the social platforms that everybody is talking about today so that I can make sure I'm addressing their questions. In theory, I'm tracking all of these things, but maybe there's one I've missed. I get this FOMO and this fear that, my goodness, there might be something out there that I've missed.
I was on Wisdom last night.
Wisdom. So I don't even know what Wisdom is. Tim, what's Wisdom?
It's a podcasty type platform.
I'll be
It's
speaking with somebody.
Social audio is the bracket it would be.
Social audio, okay.
I'll be speaking with somebody who's launched Frankie later today. It is
FOMO again now. I'm terrified.
It is food reviews.
Lovely.
Interesting.
That one I'm gonna. What was that again? Was it called Frankie?
Frankie.
Definitely gonna check that one.
Franki.
Thanks, Rob. Another one to add to my list. Things to go and analyse. But Lenwood, if it's all right for me to sort of take that question a little bit further, I think this is one of the things that keeps us up awake at night, and in reality it shouldn't, because we don't need to know how all of these things work and what they are. So I think this goes back to Rob's initial question of, because there's so many overlaps between the audiences of all these things, in all honesty, we're speaking to the same people again and again. I think this is the most important thing. So as you go through 2023, as new platforms come along, I'm guessing we're going to get a question about BeReal. I'm checking the questions now. I'm guessing we're going to get a question about BeReal from somebody at some point. I think BeReal is fascinating as an environment, but should you as a marketer be prioritizing it? Let me give you some context to that. There are currently roughly 20 million daily active users, depending on which data source you look at. And there's all sorts of wildly differing stats there. But the one I'm going to choose out of everything I've seen, 20 million is probably an optimistic but fair assessment of the number of daily active users on BeReal. There are 2 billion daily active users on Facebook still, despite all of the media stories of Facebook is dying and all the other nonsense that you'll read in those clickbait headlines. Facebook still has 99 times as many daily active users as Be Real. Now, does that make one of them better or worse for your needs? Depends entirely on what you're trying to do. And I think as a marketer, we need to stop getting distracted by all of this hype and hyperbole and superlatives, as Adam was saying earlier, in all of these headlines. Those numbers are interesting, but they're not the answer to our questions. If you know that you want to reach a very specific niche of people and you know you can find them all on Reddit, Reddit is a great place for you to be. But it doesn't mean it's the only place you should be. So I think as a marketer, don't panic. You definitely do not need to be on all of them. And I think that's the most important takeaway from that overlaps chart, is doing one or two of these things. Doing one, in fact, well, is more than enough to get you most of the way done. So theoretically, I live in the world of social media. I publish stuff to all sorts of different websites and whatever else. I do LinkedIn as my main one, and that's 80% of my effort. I then do a bit of Twitter, and that's probably the remaining 19%. There's 1% left, and occasionally now and again I'll put something up on Facebook. But in all honesty, even though I know the value of it and I know what could be achieved if I invested lots of time and effort in doing different things, doing one or two things and doing them well is way better than spreading yourself thin across too many things and making no impact. So yes, Benwood, it is incredibly difficult to keep track of all digital trends, but you don't need to.
Yeah.
But FOMO is real.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Do not disagree with that whatsoever. But I think it's just, it's like saying, what are all the great parties I'm missing while I'm at this one? It's like, it's not going to do you any favors. You're just going to end up exhausted and ill by the end of it. And, actually, there's a lot of stuff going out. So the folks at Hootsuite have been doing a lot of things recently about the mental health issues that are faced by a lot of social media practitioners because they're stretched in so many different directions. I think it is an important thing for us to consider. Your job is not to be everywhere all the time. Your job is to deliver your objectives as best you can with the available resource. Let's not kid ourselves. We're not superhuman. Do the best with what's available to you.
Yeah, I like that.
As a marketer, is there value in first mover advantage?
There is, but goodness, it's harder work to do it more than once, and you are absolutely clutching at straws each time. So that's a very pertinent question. Thanks, Rob. I was thinking about this earlier today. There is always a brand or two that does an amazing thing on that new platform, and they make the headlines, and everybody's like, if only that had been us. I can name you one or two brands that have done that consistently on more than 3 platforms, and that's about it. The rest of them, they're a one-hit wonder, and that's great for the short term. And look, by all means, I'm not dissing it, but I'm just saying, wow, that's hard work. If you're trying to do it every single time, you've got to be incredibly creative. You've got to have resource. You've got to have time. To be honest, I would much rather invest my time and effort as a marketer with limited resources in the place that I know we're going to deliver a great result. And if the next big thing becomes a really big thing, I'll learn how to use it in due time. So yes, first mover advantage for every now and again. It's like the stock market. You can quite easily be the guy that makes $1 million. You can be the lady that makes $1 billion in crypto. But there's one of them out of the millions that lost money. So yeah.
And so just picking up on William Shorten's question there, picking up the being real. Simon, how do you turn up to those different platforms, and how do you flex your authentic personality?
Brilliant question. Thank you for that. So I think, William, in response to that, how do you turn up there? I think the first thing to do is understand how the audience uses it. Well, first of all, let me rewind. Do you need to be there, and is it a better use of your time and effort versus all the other things that you have available to you? So that's the first question. What is it that you think you're going to be able to achieve differently on that platform that you cannot achieve on the ones you've already got your head around? Considering that, especially when it comes to Be Real as a platform, all of the users on Be Real use another platform. It's just inevitable at the moment. You're not going to get any unique audience there. So this is not a new user. This is somebody you can already reach elsewhere. You're just reaching them in a different way with a different kind of content. So that's the most important thing. What is it about the platform that entices you? If the answer to that is it's in the headlines and it's got some sexy numbers, I'm going to really frustrate you. I'm going to be inappropriate even for a business conversation. If it's the big numbers that are attracting you, there are plenty of adult entertainment sites out there that have way better, bigger numbers. If it was just those reach numbers that you were looking at, that's what you should be doing. You know that's wrong for your business context, and that's the important question. Is this a good business context for me to deliver results? Therein you start. And then you start to say, from a content perspective, what's good? What's my audience using it for? Why are they turning up there versus Snapchat versus Discord versus all the other stuff? Have a look, have a play around with it, spend some time on there. If you as a user get excited by it and you can see what to do with it, by all means go ahead. I'm going to confess, so Clubhouse, you remember Clubhouse? So I dived in with both feet and all limbs when it first came out. I loved it. and it lasted about 6 weeks, and then I fell out of love with it because it became an ego fest. It was nasty, and I just sort of was like, I didn't need to turn out to another room where somebody was.
We invested probably about 3 months in it, and then found that we had a discussion and we realised that our audience was probably on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and look, I'm not in any way saying that Clubhouse is not a great place and that the 6 weeks that I spent on it were not amazing. I learned some fantastic insights from people that I would never have connected in other places, and I think that was lovely about Clubhouse is I met different kinds of people, but I just could not continue to invest in it as a marketer over time because other things required me to prioritize. So, William, to your question, that's the first bit of the answer. Your authentic bit is, I think, show up with the personality that's most appropriate for that setting. How you work in your office versus how you talk to your colleagues at the pub versus what you do on a barbecue at your friend's house on a Saturday night are going to be different facets of your authentic self. They're all your authentic self. Choose which bits of it you want to bring to that conversation and be human. I think that's the easiest bit is just don't pretend to be something you're not. Sorry, I could go on all day. Lorena, you've not asked your question yet, so I'm going to
Yes, I have a question. Yes, I've been going through. Yeah, thank you very much for the information. And I've been through the analysis, and I saw numbers and numbers and numbers. For example, when you, it's all right. And when you, for example, show numbers about how people or how much people look for branding, you see that Kenya is one of the countries that has the highest number. So when if you think about Kenya, you think it's a poor country. So, and then it brought me to the quality of these numbers, of not the only quantity but quality. So, do you? Because my question actually is LinkedIn, for example, is the emblematic professional network, and it does not appear as one of the highest visited platforms. So, do you consider when you do your analysis only numbers or also quality of use of the platforms, or is this a task that we have to do when we work with the platforms?
Yeah. Brilliant question. Thank you for that. And absolutely, quality is the most important thing. And ironically, I publish quantity so that you can move beyond quantity questions. So one of in my justification, in my sort of defense here, all the data we provide is to allow you to move to higher value questions. Like I said at the beginning of today's conversation, data isn't the answer, it just allows you to make better decisions. And I think when you look at the LinkedIn numbers in particular, this is specific just to LinkedIn in our reports, a couple of things to note. One is that LinkedIn does not publish active user figures. Even in the advertising reach figures that they publish, which we share in the reports, that's based on total registered users. So they're not comparable on a like-for-like basis with the other platforms that we include in the report. That's not to say the numbers are in any way better or worse, so don't let that distract you. But it doesn't make that, I'm assuming you meant the list of most used platforms where we've got the 17 platforms with more than 300 million monthly active users. Based on my analysis, and I'm very happy for somebody from Microsoft or LinkedIn to correct me here because I would love an actual number, but based on my analysis, I don't believe that it quite reaches 300 million monthly actives. There are a lot of people that only use LinkedIn very occasionally to update their CV still, despite the amazing opportunities we know it offers. For the average person on the street that isn't in sort of the work that we do, to be honest, LinkedIn is an occasional thing, and it's incredibly valuable when they come in, but they're not going to be in there every day like you and I, updating and posting and sharing. So that doesn't detract from the value of LinkedIn. I think even though it has a smaller niche audience, it's still a valuable one.
I was some days ago at LinkedIn here in Madrid, and they told me that 80% of their users are passive users. 80%.
Yeah, it's quite significant.
A huge number, yes.
But then of those users, the latest numbers that they've got, so out of the data that we see from their ad planning tools, 850 million registered users. So even at that rate, we're looking at, I mean, even if that was only 100 million, I'm doing them a disservice by that number. It's probably higher than that. But even if it was only 100 million, those are high value people. So I would rather have 100 million high value audience people that I could reach with rather than completely random folks that are less valuable in my context. This comes down to targeting. But yeah, I think, to your point about whether you're looking at quality versus quantity, this is the most important thing when you're choosing how to focus your efforts as a marketer. Don't get distracted by those big numbers. Even on Facebook, there are reasons to be wary of the big numbers. Facebook themselves, in their earnings announcements to investors, say that 11% of their user base on Facebook is probably duplicate accounts and 5% is probably fake. That means that 16% of their total active user base may not be the kinds of person that you want to target because you've already reached them elsewhere, or because they're not authentic humans. Now, those are based on Facebook's own numbers. I'm not saying you should or should not, but even 85% of 3 billion people, that's a massive number to reach, and therefore get excited by it. I'll pause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Hi.
Simon.
Thanks, Lorena. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Who's going next? Alex, are you?
yeah, I'll go next. So social is clearly a huge and growing part of our lives, providing a significant opportunity to connect and learn from others easily.
Yeah.
From a B2B perspective, when we think about some of the things that have been discussed and the importance has, I know the report sort of focuses on the paid media side of things and the kind of the volume and how big social is, but when we think about it from a B2B perspective, and specifically social being a place to bring customers, prospects, partners, employees together, why do you think companies don't pay enough attention to this from a cultural perspective to really put social at the heart?
A great question again. Thank you for that one, Alex. So just to clarify one thing, when you said we focus on the paid media bit, when it comes to the social media numbers, we publish ad audience numbers simply because they're the ones that we can collect. I would publish a greater variety of numbers if the platforms made it easier, but they don't, frustratingly. So that's the reason I use the ad audience numbers, is they're very accessible for us and they change regularly, so that's a good story to tell. But you're right, I think that there's much more to the social media opportunity than just the paid interruptions, as I like to call them. And I don't necessarily mean that negatively, but it is a little bit like somebody's going to come in and poke you when you're having a conversation with somebody else and say, I want to tell you about my product. And it's like, oh, that's not the best way of engaging somebody. If you had the opportunity to sit down and say, we share the following things in common, we've got the shared interests, let's have a chat, that's magic. That's where you start to build bonds and you start to be able to learn from and influence others. And I think it's that bit that a lot of businesses see social media still as very transactional. So your question is almost the answer, weirdly. It's like, because so many people and so many reports, including mine, focus on that commercial side of things, they miss the softer side of things. They miss the much more qualitative value of these platforms because it's not being reported at a boardroom level. Finance don't see it, procurement don't see it, whoever else don't see it. And from that perspective, then it doesn't get the necessary attention in order to bring it to the top table, which is crazy because I think when you look at things like employer branding, just the value of being able to hire the right employees and the right partners and what that then brings to your business, almost all of that is organic. You obviously can invest in paid media when you're doing those activities, but realistically, if you think about your LinkedIn feed today, the companies that you build the strongest favorable opinions of are the ones that are consistently sharing content that adds value to your daily activities. And I think it's that bit there is not nearly enough attention being given to that at this time. And we need to focus on it more. I don't know quite how we do that better, but I'm going to echo your question back to you, Alex.
Yeah.
Have you got any tips for folks based on that? I know that's important to you, so experiences would be great.
Well, it's one of the biggest challenges that I have is convincing organizations to invest the time that they need to in their people to develop their personal brands, to create content that will drive greater interaction from an individual perspective, but then also helps the business and the organization. Because depending on who you talk to, whether it's the marketing leader or the sales leader or the board, they've got their own idea about that transaction, as it were.
Yeah, that. I think a big part of this comes down to metrics and measurement as well. So the things that for whatever reason, the numbers that we report back when we talk about social media performance in marketing are probably not the ones that deliver the greatest value to the bottom line.
Yeah.
We're guilty of that as an industry, and it was our own fault. We went with the easiest tracked things, and then they became the default metrics, and it was daft. I personally fight with this every day, and I'll be totally honest with you. So, I mean, especially the folks on this call, I'm sure have been subject to my incessant posting of charts on LinkedIn. You've seen the kinds of stuff that I share. And over the past, I suppose, couple of weeks, I've been trying a few different things, and I get frustrated when the reach of those posts is not what I want it to be, when I don't get the same number of likes. And I'm completely, I have to physically force myself to go into the things and look through the numbers. What's the quality of conversation? What's the value of new kinds of engagement that I'm getting from this? And does that have value? The irony is that a post might get a very small number of views compared to what I would like it to deliver. It may get very few likes, but I may get one person that engages with it who becomes a business lead, who becomes a new partner, and whatever else. And that must be where I focus. And yet, as with everybody else in this industry, I get distracted by the headline metrics. I want the instant gratification of bigger numbers. And we're doing ourselves a disservice if we stop paying attention to them and know what matters and measure only that. We'll not only be a lot more comfortable and less FOMO, to Linwood's point earlier, but we'll also have a little bit more sort of focus on adding value, and then we'll know that the time we invest is worth it. But I'm as bad as anybody else, so
I think
it's easy for
dopamine
me.
takes over, doesn't it, sometimes?
It does, totally, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. I'm guilty as well.
Great question, Alex. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else, or is it just me?
It's just you now.
So Simon, my question was about search and people using social media as a platform to search. And there's lots of places where we can go to search. Google. I even believe that Microsoft have got a search platform. But people, I'm being told by our customers that they're being found on social media by people coming to social media and searching for stuff.
Yeah.
So you get some figures. So rather than me giving them, why don't you give us your view and the impact that you have on that?
Yeah, just because you mentioned it, I feel like I'm duty bound to give you the numbers now, so it doesn't look like we're being glib. 92, in fact, more than 92% of the search engine market share belongs to Google. Bing then has 3.5%. So just to give you perspective, anything after that has less than 1%. But as you rightly point out, I mean, search behaviors, and I think I need to qualify this because there's a very important difference between search as an activity versus searching for, which is what our audiences, our consumers, our customers would refer to it as. They're looking for information, they're finding inspiration, all that kind of stuff. The number of people who go to social platforms in their broadest sense, 75+% of people that use social media are going to social platforms to look for information about brands at some point. It may not be the primary reason why they go there, but when it comes to primary reasons for visiting social platforms, finding information about brands, seeking out content from and information about brands, half of working age adults say that is one of the primary reasons why they go to social media. Now, does that mean that they're actively going in there and doing a search for a category and then narrowing down things? No, probably not. They're going in there to see what Nike's just published. They're going in there to learn a little bit more about what the latest SaaS platform is doing on LinkedIn. They're going there to learn about the things that matter to them. Yes, they are increasingly doing active search in there as well, but at this point in time, even amongst those Gen Z, depending on where you are in the world, even amongst that younger group where people are more likely to go to a social network to find information about brands than they are to go to a search engine, the difference is very small. So we're talking, they're using both, and almost 50% of them are going to both each time, right? So do not in any way think that this move to searching for things on social means that search engines are dead. They are absolutely not, and they're still a critical part of your mix. But what search engines don't do is discovery. So I cannot get serendipity in the Google first page, really. I enter a very specific query and Google has absolutely nailed how to give me a direct response to the query that I entered. That's what we use it for. That's what we expect. That's what we get. When you're looking at broader discovery, which is more about serendipitous learning of new things, when it's about discovering entire new product categories, let alone new brands, the internet doesn't do that so well, especially when it comes to shopping. Now, if you sort of step out of the digital world, think about the last time you walked down a high street, or last time you were walking to a dinner somewhere and you went down a random street and you suddenly walked past a new set of shops and you looked in the windows and you saw things and you thought, ooh, that is discovery, right? You weren't going out looking for it, but you discovered it. There was no search, but you still found, if that makes sense. And I think this is the bit that, because of the way that we behave on the internet, because we're quite often quite sort of considered in the way that we go to these following websites, we go to these platforms, and this is what we're expecting. That's what the next phase of opportunity in the marketing world around all of this is going to be. Now, one of the most important changes over the past 18 months to 2 years has been the growth of TikTok, not just because it's a great sort of content platform, but because of the way its algorithm works. The whole of the Western social media world was driven around social graphs. So the content that I saw in my feed was driven by who I followed and who I had connected with. And TikTok upended that because it went, nah, actually, it doesn't matter who you know. It matters what people like you are consuming and what they enjoy. And all of a sudden, obviously, everybody's scrambling because that experience was quite new. Now, as soon as other platforms understand how to do that, that magic is no longer unique, and therefore that perhaps cutting edge that TikTok had is going to be a little bit diluted. But it's now got sufficient momentum that it's not going to lose the gains that it's made. But there are so many opportunities for greater discovery. That's not to say search loses importance, it's just that we need to add on to it. So I'm looking at the moment, and this is one of the things that I am actively looking at as one of the top things I want to know more about in 2023 is how do we improve discovery in digital environments? And part of that is through better social algorithms. Part of that is through much better approaches to serving value on e-commerce platforms, whether that's direct to consumer or marketplaces like Amazon. It's so much opportunity to learn about things I don't know about. I'm a music fan in my personal life. I spend my life trying to find music that sounds like this. And can I do that easily? No. I can get you to tell me all the other songs that an artist has produced. I can get you things that are the same year, things that are technically in the same genre. But if I said, I want a song that sounds like this, nothing does that for me. Pandora used to try. Even then, it struggles. That's discovery in its best. I want to learn things that, when I don't know the question, how do I ask it to Google?
But isn't there also the issue that search in the traditional sense, the Google and Microsoft search engines, they deliver carefully curated answers to the questions that you're asking, but what they don't deliver is truth. So, for example, if you type in and search for, so they deliver facts. If I search for what's the capital of Germany, it'll say Berlin. If I say, or whatever, and fundamentally, the as a buyer, it doesn't deliver what you want. If you type in what's the best CRM system, what you get is 10 companies that come back saying we're market leading, we offer the following functionality, because everybody claims to be the best. If you run the same search on social, you get a completely different set of results, which are based on people's experience. Nobody ever on their website says we're third best, a little bit expensive, and not always reliable, ever. So when you run a similar search on social, what you see is a much more open. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen a bigger migration of search from traditional search engines, which is all about search engine optimization and paid positioning, to something which is true. So like when you buy from Amazon, you look at the feedback, and the first thing you do is you go to the 1-star feedback, and you look at the 1-star feedback, and the 1-star feedback says to you, this said this was a beginner's guide, and it isn't. I didn't understand a lot of what they were talking about. It assumed I had a BA in statistics, to which you say, I have a BA in statistics. This is a perfect book for me. And it's that honest feedback that helps you curate whether or not this is the right product or service for you. And I think that I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of a move towards social search.
It's definitely on the rise, although it's not rising quite as quickly as I'd expected, especially based on the data that we saw this time last year. So let me unpack a little bit of that. So I'm not trying to antagonize you here, Adam, but I'm a little bit wary of that word
Please,
truth.
antagonize.
I think, Google does deliver truth, but only where it knows what the truth is. I think that the answer to what's the best SaaS platform out there, I don't think any algorithm could tell you that, because it varies depending on who you are and what you need, whereas Berlin's always going to be Berlin's Berlin. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's look at the social algorithms. At the moment, they are optimized to deliver the latest, freshest content, not necessarily in perfect chronological order, which I know is an ongoing frustration, but they are there to deliver what is typically a more entertaining or newsworthy experience, rather than going back through the annals of time to deliver you stories from 10 years ago that were appropriate. This varies massively from one platform to another, and depending on how sophisticated you want to be and how nerdy you are, you can find value. So I still find that one of the best places to search is Twitter. So if I want to find older information on Twitter, it does actually provide me with advanced search, but my God, it's difficult to use if you're not nerdy. If you want a quick answer, it ain't going to happen. You've then got fantastic social listening tools, but obviously you need to invest a little bit of money to get the most value from them, but they do allow you to do much more of that search. But the average consumer ain't going to be investing in one of those to find out what they should have for dinner tonight, right? So that's not what this is going to do. So yeah, to your question, why are they not doing this? Because they've not been built that way, because the technology that powers their core proposition is almost in opposition to that. It wants to focus on the new and the fresh rather than go back a little bit more and provide you with a balanced perspective. They're going to have to develop an entirely new algorithm that does that, and I know that they're investing in it. And if
Facebook tried, didn't they?
They
Facebook,
did.
3 or 4 years ago, they had this thing they were going to launch called Social Curve, was it? Social Graph?
Possibly.
It was in beta, and I registered for it. And the idea was that if you go onto Google, and I'm not belittling Google, if you go onto Google, it takes information which is drawn from the entire internet, much of which won't be appropriate to you. If you go and search within Facebook, where most of us have a presence, the people that are closest to you, the people that you interact with most, are likely to be people who are most like you. And therefore, when you say the best Scotch whisky is this, it's not based on the fact that you have invested in promoting that. It's based on the fact that you're a Scotch whisky connoisseur and you particularly like this one. And because I like you and trust you, that's much more likely to be something which is weighty and inform my decision about that.
Yeah.
And I think that was a brilliant thing that didn't sadly come to fruition, because that would have been massively helpful in helping that discovery stage. What should I eat for dinner tonight? Well, my mates all tell me it should be this. Okay, well, I'll give that in.
It's interesting when you look at what Facebook are pushing as their latest ad placements. The opportunity to appear in search results on Facebook is definitely there, and it's a decent audience. I've actually got the numbers for it. I'll scooch them out while I'm talking to you. But I think that's where they struggled, is that finding the commercial answer to the search thing versus the ability to just put display into your feed, I think is the bit where they stumbled and they fell over. So potential audience that marketers can reach with ads in Facebook search results based on our October report, 730 million. I mean, that's a fairly decent sized audience. Not quite as big as Google, but decent. But, I think what you're revealing here, Adam, is that there is a massively untapped opportunity that none of them have quite cracked. Ironically, like I said, I think I get personally good results from Twitter. If I was going to single out one platform that did search better than any other, it's got to be Pinterest, but it's very specific in what it does for me. If I want an image that looks like this, if I want something that's similar in graphic style to X, it will give me 25, 100 different things that are actually very similar to X. And that's hugely valuable. I save myself a lot of time and stress by going in there where I'm looking for visual inspiration. But it's very specific, and it only does that. I couldn't go in there and ask it, what should I have for dinner? Because I ain't going to get any answers that are worth sharing there. So this is, like I said, it's one of the things I'm tracking for next year. One of the biggest opportunities, the one that cracks it, is going to make a lot of money. Because, like you said, brands want to be there in the discovery phase, not just the finding the objective truth.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions of Simon? From the audience, from you guys, Lorena?
No, I just I wrote to Simon. I think 1 year ago, and asked him why doesn't he research Peru like other countries. You remember, and you told me that you have already a contact there. But I always felt like, why don't you put Peru on your map of users of on internet.
You're making him blush, Lorena.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see
So,
it. But
Lorena, there's a very easy answer to that question for the folks tuning in. We just don't have access to the data. It's not available. So the 50 countries that we produce on those bar charts are the ones for which I have access to data, which is driven by the commercial realities of our research partners. However, as I'm hoping you're aware already, we do have a dedicated report on Peru. It just doesn't have quite as much data as the rest. But that's a perfect opportunity, thank you, Lorena, for me to come in and give you my sales pitch as we wrap up today.
yes,
I'm not selling you anything because it's all free.
I see Chile, I see Colombia, Argentina, and I don't see my country, so I got a little bit jealous. But
The good news is Peru is on the roadmap for our partners. I believe we're going to be getting more data for Peru in the coming months, so fingers crossed. But I can't do 250 countries on a single chart because it's just not visible. So regardless of which ones come, I will need to make an editorial choice at some point. Sorry.
No. I perfectly understand. Please don't worry.
Any more questions? Lenwood, Adam, Rob?
Millions. But
Alex,
It's been brilliant. Thank
Simon,
you.
this has been awesome. It really has.
Yes.
I don't know about
Thank you
you,
very
but
much.
I'm sure we've all learned something. And I've
Absolutely.
certainly learned something as well, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And we've had some great feedback from the audience as well. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about this.
No worries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for allowing me to nerd out. It was good.
Thank you very much, Simon.
very much, Simon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and thanks for the audience, and thanks for the panel.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
See you next
everybody.
time.
Guys.